The dust cloud rising behind the stagecoach was the first sign of trouble that afternoon in Truckee, California, and Lucas Vance knew it before the horses even came into view, their flanks white with foam and their eyes rolling wild with panic. He set down his hammer on the fence post he had been repairing and watched as the coach careened down the mountain road at a speed that would have been reckless even without the obvious signs of distress. The driver was slumped sideways in his seat, and there was no shotgun rider at all, which told Lucas everything he needed to know about how badly things had gone wrong up in those high passes. The year was 1873, and Truckee sat nestled in the Sierra Nevada mountains, a town that had grown from the railroad camps and now served as a vital stop between California and Nevada. Lucas had bought his small ranch just outside town 2 years prior, after spending most of his adult life driving cattle and saving every dollar he could spare. At 26 years old, he was finally building something that belonged to him, and he had learned to read trouble the way other men read newspapers. The stagecoach veered off the main road and headed straight toward his property, which was either the worst luck he had ever had or the best luck the people inside that coach would ever have. Lucas ran toward the road, waving his arms and positioning himself where the horses might see him and respond to a human presence. The team was running blind with fear, but they were still trained animals, and somewhere in their panic was the memory of obeying commands. He shouted and stood his ground as the horses thundered toward him, and at the last possible moment, they veered slightly, enough that he could grab the harness of the lead horse and let his weight and momentum drag him along. His boots carved furrows in the dusty road as he hauled back with all his strength, calling out in the steady, firm voice that horses responded to even in their terror. The team began to slow, fighting him but losing speed with every stride, until finally they came to a shuddering, stamping halt 50 yards from where he had first grabbed hold. Lucas held the horses steady, talking to them in low tones while his heart hammered against his ribs. The driver groaned and started to slip from his seat, and Lucas called out to whoever might be inside the coach, "Is anyone hurt in there? The driver needs help." The door flew open, and a young woman tumbled out in a cascade of dark blue skirts and auburn hair that had come loose from its pins. She caught herself against the side of the coach and immediately looked up at the driver, her face pale, but her expression determined rather than hysterical. That alone told Lucas she was made of stronger stuff than most. "He was shot," she said, her voice carrying a slight tremor but remaining clear. "About an hour ago. Bandits stopped us in the pass. They took the strongbox and killed the guard. The driver got us away, but he has been getting worse." Lucas secured the lead horse's reins to a nearby fence post he had just set and moved to help the driver down. The man was conscious but gray-faced, with blood soaking through his coat on the left side of his chest. It was bad, but Lucas had seen worse, and more importantly, the man was still breathing and still conscious, which meant there was a chance. "Help me get him inside," Lucas said to the woman, who immediately moved to support the driver's other side without being told twice. Together they half carried, half dragged the wounded man toward Lucas's small ranch house, which sat about 100 yards from the road in a clearing he had spent months preparing before building. 2 other passengers emerged from the coach as they walked, an elderly man in a city suit who looked shaken, and a middle-aged woman who was quietly weeping into a handkerchief. Neither of them moved to help, which irritated Lucas but did not surprise him. People divided into 2 types in a crisis, those who acted and those who froze, and it was clear which type the young woman in blue was. "Sir, you and the lady there check on the horses," Lucas called over his shoulder. Make sure they have not injured themselves. Walk them if they seem calm enough." He did not wait to see if they obeyed. The driver was growing heavier between them as his strength faded, and every second mattered. They got him into the house and onto Lucas's bed, which was the only proper bed in the small two-room structure. Lucas had built it himself over the winter, and while it was not fancy, it was solid and clean. "I need to see the wound," Lucas said, already unbuttoning the driver's coat. The young woman moved to the other side of the bed without hesitation and began helping remove the man's outer clothing. Her hands were steady despite the blood, and Lucas found himself grateful for whatever circumstances had forged such calm in a woman who could not have been more than 23 or 24 years old. The wound was high on the left side of the chest, and the bullet had gone clean through, which was both good and bad. Good because there was no lead to dig out, bad because there were 2 wounds to treat instead of 1. Lucas moved to his stove and stoked the fire, setting water to boil and retrieving the whiskey he kept for medicinal purposes and the occasional lonely evening. "What is your name?" he asked the young woman as he gathered clean cloth from his carefully maintained supplies. Living alone this far from town meant being prepared for emergencies. "Fiona Sinclair," she said, pronouncing each word with a precision that suggested education and a good upbringing. "The driver is Mr. Carlson. He saved all our lives when he got the coach moving again after those men stopped us." Lucas nodded, focusing on cleaning the wound as best he could. Carlson had passed out, which was a mercy given what Lucas needed to do. He poured whiskey through both sides of the wound, then packed them with clean cloth and bound the driver's chest tightly to slow the bleeding. "He needs a doctor," Lucas said when he had done all he could. "But moving him again right now might kill him faster than leaving him still. The doctor is in town, about 3 miles from here. Someone needs to ride for him." "I can go," Fiona said immediately. Lucas looked at her properly for the first time since the crisis had begun. She was tall for a woman, perhaps 5.5 feet, with the kind of bone structure that would have been called handsome rather than pretty. Her eyes were a striking gray-green, and they met his directly without the downward glance most women employed. There was dirt on her dress and a small tear in her sleeve, and her hair hung in tangled waves past her shoulders where it had escaped its pins, but she stood straight and spoke with confidence. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Yes. I grew up on a farm in Missouri before my father moved us to Sacramento. I have been riding since I was 6 years old." Lucas made a decision. "My horse is in the barn. His name is Sterling and he is calm but fast. Tell Dr. Morrison what happened and that I am the one asking for him. He will come." Fiona nodded and turned to go, but Lucas caught her arm gently. "Miss Sinclair, thank you for helping. Most people would have fallen apart." She gave him a small, tight smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Most people did not grow up with 4 brothers and a father who believed daughters should be as capable as sons. "I will be back with the doctor as quickly as I can." She was gone in a rustle of skirts, and Lucas heard her speaking to his horse in the barn in that same calm, authoritative voice. A few moments later, hoofbeats announced her departure toward town. Lucas settled into a chair beside Carlson's bed and checked the man's pulse, which was thin but steady. All they could do now was wait. The elderly man and the middle-aged woman eventually made their way into the house, both looking uncertain and out of place. Lucas directed them to sit at his small table and put coffee on to brew, more to give himself something to do than because he wanted any. The adrenaline of the crisis was fading, leaving him tired and aware of the dozen bruises he had acquired while stopping the runaway coach. "What were you all doing on that route?" Lucas asked. "The pass is dangerous this time of year. Too many places for bandits to hide. The elderly man cleared his throat. The railroad was faster but more expensive. We all chose the cheaper route. I suppose we have learned why it was cheaper. The guard who died, Lucas said. Did he have family? I do not know, the man admitted, looking ashamed. We did not speak much during the journey. Lucas felt a familiar frustration rise in his chest but pushed it down. There was no point in anger now. A man was dead, and another might yet die, and anger would not change either fact. He checked Carlson's bandages and was relieved to see the bleeding had slowed significantly. The man had a fighting chance, which was more than could be said for many who took a bullet to the chest. Time crawled past. Lucas kept himself busy checking on Carlson, tending the horses, and making sure his unexpected guests had water and something to eat. The sun was starting its descent toward the western peaks when he finally heard hoofbeats approaching at a gallop. He stepped outside to see Fiona returning with Dr. Morrison, a gray-haired man of about 50 who had served as a field surgeon during the war and had seen more gunshot wounds than any man should have to. They got Morrison inside, and Lucas stepped back to let him work, watching as the doctor examined Carlson with efficient, practiced movements. Fiona stood beside Lucas, close enough that he could smell the horse sweat and dust on her, mixed with something floral that must have been soap or perfume from earlier in the day. He will live if infection does not set in, Morrison finally announced. You did good work cleaning and binding the wound, Lucas. Probably saved his life by keeping him still rather than trying to haul him to town. Miss Sinclair helped, Lucas said, nodding toward Fiona. Morrison glanced at her with approval. Sensible girl. Most women I know would have fainted at the sight of all that blood. He began repacking his bag. He needs to stay still for at least 3 days, longer if possible. I will come back tomorrow to check on him. If he develops a fever, send for me immediately. After Morrison left, promising to notify the sheriff about the robbery and the murdered guard, Lucas found himself standing in his small home with 4 people who had nowhere else to go. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple, and he realized that his carefully ordered solitary life had just become significantly more complicated. I do not have room for everyone here, Lucas said, thinking through the logistics. But I have a barn with a loft that is clean and dry. I can set up pallets there for whoever is comfortable with that arrangement. Miss Sinclair should have the house since Carlson will need someone to check on him during the night, and she is the only one who seems capable of helping if something goes wrong. The elderly man, who had introduced himself as Mr. Patterson, nodded agreement. The barn will be fine for me. I have slept in worse places. The middle-aged woman, a Mrs. Dunphy, looked less pleased but nodded as well. How long do you think we will need to impose on your hospitality, Mr. Vance? Until Carlson can be moved and until the stage line can send another coach for you, Lucas said. Could be 3 days, could be a week. Depends on a lot of things. He did not mention that it also depended on whether the bandits who had robbed them were still in the area. No point in frightening people more than they already were. But he made a mental note to keep his rifle loaded and close at hand, just in case. That night, after he had settled Patterson and Mrs. Dunphy in the barn and checked on the horses one final time, Lucas returned to the house to find Fiona sitting beside Carlson's bed with a damp cloth, cooling the man's forehead. She had found his spare pitcher and bowl and washed her face and hands, and had done something with her hair to tame it back into a respectable bun, though curling tendrils still escaped around her face. You should sleep, Lucas said softly. I can watch him for a while. Fiona shook her head. You have done enough today. More than enough. You stopped a runaway stagecoach with your bare hands, treated a gunshot wound, housed and fed 4 strangers, and gave up your own bed. The least I can do is sit up with Mr. Carlson so you can rest." "I will sleep in the other room," Lucas said, gesturing to the small space that served as his kitchen and sitting area. "But wake me if anything changes with him, or if you need anything at all." She met his eyes then, and Lucas saw something in them that made his breath catch. Not attraction, exactly, though he would have been lying if he said he had not noticed she was a handsome woman. It was recognition, the kind that passed between people who understood each other without needing many words. "I will," she promised. "And Mr. Vance, thank you, truly. I do not know what would have happened to us if you had not been here." "Call me Lucas," he said, surprising himself with the offer. He was not usually quick to invite familiarity. "And you already thanked me. Your presence is payment enough for me, Miss Sinclair." "Any decent person would have done the same." "Call me Fiona," she replied with a small smile. "And I disagree. Many people would have turned away or demanded payment upfront before helping. You did not hesitate." Lucas did not know what to say to that, so he simply nodded and went to make up a pallet on his floor. He fell asleep to the soft sounds of Fiona humming something under her breath, a tune he did not recognize, but found comforting nonetheless. Morning came bright and cold, as mornings in the mountains always did. Lucas woke to find Fiona asleep in the chair beside Carlson's bed, her head pillowed on her arms on the mattress. Carlson himself was awake and looking confused but alive. Lucas checked the man's wound and was relieved to find it showed no signs of infection, then quietly built up the fire and started coffee brewing. The smell woke Fiona, who sat up with a start and immediately checked on Carlson. The driver tried to speak, but could only manage a raspy whisper. Lucas brought him water and helped him drink, and gradually Carlson's voice strengthened enough to talk. "Thought I was a dead man for sure," Carlson said, his weathered face creasing with exhaustion. "Those bandits meant business. Shot poor Tommy without even a warning just to show they were serious." "Tommy was the guard?" Lucas asked, and Carlson nodded. "Good man. Had a wife in Sacramento. Someone needs to tell her." Tears leaked from the corners of Carlson's eyes. "I tried to get us away fast, but they still got off a shot. Do not remember much after that except Miss Sinclair here talking to me, keeping me awake until we reached you." Lucas glanced at Fiona with new respect. Keeping a wounded man conscious could make the difference between life and death, and she had known that instinctively or through experience. There was more to Fiona Sinclair than he had initially realized, and he found himself curious about her story. The next few days fell into a strange routine. Lucas worked his ranch, repairing fences and tending his small herd of cattle, while keeping close enough to the house to respond if needed. Fiona took charge of Carlson's care with a competence that suggested she had nursed people before, and she also took over cooking for the group, much to Lucas's relief. He was a functional cook at best, and having someone who could make a proper meal was a luxury he had not experienced since leaving his mother's house 8 years ago. Patterson and Mrs. Dunphy mostly kept to themselves, venturing to the house for meals and otherwise staying out of the way. Lucas got the impression that both of them felt uncomfortable with the situation and were counting the hours until they could leave. He could not blame them, but their discomfort highlighted how different Fiona was. She seemed perfectly at ease, moving through his small house as if she had always belonged there, and he caught himself watching her more often than was probably appropriate. On the 3rd day, Sheriff Coleman rode out from town to take statements about the robbery. He was a gruff man in his 40s who had been keeping the peace in Truckee for the better part of a decade. Lucas respected him as much as he respected any lawman, which was to say, he thought, Coleman was honest even if the law itself was often imperfect. "We found where it happened," Coleman told them after speaking with Carlson and the other passengers. "Tommy's body was there. We brought him back to town for a proper burial, sent word to his wife." He shook his head grimly. "No sign of the bandits, though. They knew the mountains well enough to disappear without a trace, probably long gone to Nevada by now." "Will you keep looking?" Fiona asked. Coleman gave her a long look, the kind men often gave women who spoke up on matters they considered masculine territory. "We will do what we can, miss. But the mountains are big, and 3 men with a head start can disappear real easy." After the sheriff left, Lucas found Fiona standing outside, staring up at the peaks that ringed his property. The afternoon sun caught the red in her hair and turned it to copper. "I hate that they will probably get away with it," she said without looking at him. "Tommy died and Mr. Carlson nearly died, and those men will just go on to rob someone else." "Probably," Lucas agreed, because there was no point in comforting lies. "That is how it works out here more often than not. The law does what it can, but the territory is too big and too wild for justice to reach everywhere." "Is that why you live all the way out here alone?" Fiona turned to face him. "Because you do not believe in justice?" "I live out here because I wanted something that was mine," Lucas said. "I spent 10 years working other men's cattle and sleeping in bunkhouses, taking orders and making just enough money to keep going. This place might not be much, but it is mine. I built that house with my own hands. I dug the well and cleared the fields and set every fence post. That matters to me more than whether the world is just or not." Fiona nodded slowly. "I understand that, wanting something of your own. My father has a printing business in Sacramento. He wanted me to marry one of his business associates, a man 20 years older than me who treats his employees like property. I told him I would rather make my own way, even if it meant leaving with only what I could carry." "Is that why you were on the stage?" Lucas asked. "Running away?" "Not running," Fiona corrected with a slight edge to her voice. "Choosing. I was heading to Virginia City to take a position as a schoolteacher. A friend from my school days married a man there and told me they were desperate for educated women willing to teach. I have some savings and a letter of introduction, or I had them before the bandits took the strongbox that had my carpetbag strapped to it." Lucas felt something cold settle in his stomach. "They took all your money." "Everything except the few dollars I kept in my pocket for emergencies." Fiona's voice remained steady, but Lucas could see the tension in her shoulders. "Which means I need to find work as soon as possible. I was hoping, since you have been kind enough to house us, that I might offer to pay you for room and board with labor. I can cook and clean and help with whatever needs doing around your ranch until I earn enough for stage fare to Virginia City." The offer hung in the air between them, and Lucas found himself thinking about the past 3 days, about how much easier everything had been with Fiona there. How the house felt different, warmer somehow, with another person moving through it who was not afraid of work or silence. How he had caught himself looking forward to meals, because it meant sitting across from her and learning small details about her life in the way people did when they shared space. "No," he said, and watched her face fall before he continued. "You do not need to pay me, Fiona. Your presence is payment enough for me." She stared at him, confusion and something else flickering across her expression. "I do not understand. I cannot just stay here without contributing. That would not be right." "You have been contributing," Lucas pointed out. "You have been cooking and caring for Carlson and helping around the house. But even if you were not doing those things, I would not charge you for basic human decency. You were robbed and nearly killed. I am not going to profit from your misfortune." "That is not how the world works," Fiona said quietly. "Everyone wants something. Maybe, Lucas allowed. But what I want is not something you need to pay for with labor. I want to know that I helped someone who needed it. That is enough for me. They stood in silence for a long moment, and Lucas wondered if he had offended her somehow, if his refusal of her offer had touched on some pride he did not fully understand. Women could be prickly about accepting charity, he knew that much, and Fiona seemed like the type who was used to earning her own way. "Then let me offer a compromise," Fiona finally said. "I will stay and help around here as long as Mr. Carlson needs care, and until the stage line can arrange new transportation for all of us. In exchange, you teach me about ranching. I might not make it to Virginia City, or the teaching position might not work out, and I should know how to do more than keep house if I am going to make my own way in the world." Lucas considered this. It was a strange request, but not an unreasonable one, and it gave Fiona a way to stay without feeling like she was accepting pure charity. More than that, it would give him an excuse to spend time with her, to talk with her and learn more about the woman who had stumbled into his life on a runaway stagecoach. "Deal," he said, and held out his hand. Fiona shook it firmly, her hand rough with calluses despite her claimed upbringing. Her grip was strong and sure, and Lucas felt something shift in his chest, something he had not felt in longer than he cared to admit. It was not quite attraction, though that was part of it. It was recognition of a kindred spirit, someone who understood what it meant to want something beyond the life you were given. They began the next morning. Lucas showed Fiona around the property properly, explaining his plans for expansion and the challenges of ranching at this elevation. The growing season was short, the winters were brutal, and every year was a gamble against weather and predators and simple bad luck. But the land was cheap, and the market for beef was growing as more people settled in Nevada and California, and Lucas believed he could make it work if he was smart and patient. Fiona absorbed everything he told her with an intensity that surprised him. She asked intelligent questions about water rights and grazing patterns, and how to judge the health of cattle by looking at them. When they checked the fence line that afternoon, she helped him replace a rotted post without complaint, even though the work left her hands blistered. "You are not lying about growing up on a farm," Lucas observed as they walked back toward the house in the fading light. "My father likes to pretend those years never happen now that he is successful," Fiona said with a trace of bitterness. "But I remember. I remember my mother teaching me to make soap and preserve food. I remember helping my father bring in hay and mend fences. We were poor, but we were happy, before he decided that being respectable mattered more than being honest about where we came from." "Nothing wrong with where you came from," Lucas said. "Hard work and making your own way is more respectable than anything you can buy with money." "I wish my father believed that," Fiona sighed. "But he wanted better for me, or what he thought was better. A rich husband and a big house and servants to do all the work I used to do myself. He could not understand why I would want anything else." Lucas thought about his own father, a stern man who had expected his sons to follow him into the carpentry trade in Ohio. When Lucas had announced his intention to go west and try ranching, his father had called him a fool and predicted failure. They had not spoken since Lucas left at 18, and while that sometimes hurt, Lucas knew he had made the right choice. Some people never understood the need to build your own life, rather than inherit someone else's vision of what your life should be. Carlson recovered steadily over the next week, regaining strength and mobility, though Morrison warned he would need at least another week of rest before attempting travel. The stage line sent word that they would send a replacement coach as soon as one was available, probably in 10 days or so. Patterson and Mrs. Dunphy seemed relieved to have a definite timeline, But Lucas noticed that Fiona grew quieter as the date approached. They had fallen into an easy rhythm, Lucas and Fiona. She woke before dawn to start breakfast while he tended the animals. They worked together during the day, sometimes talking, sometimes in comfortable silence. She proved to be a quick study with cattle, learning to recognize the signs of illness and injury, and she had a gentle way with the more skittish animals that Lucas envied. In the evenings, they sat on the porch after dinner and watched the sun set behind the mountains, and Lucas found those moments to be the best part of his days. He was falling for her. He knew that, had known it since about the third day when she had laughed at something he said, and the sound had made his heart skip. He was falling for a woman who was planning to leave as soon as transportation arrived, heading to Virginia City to build a life that had nothing to do with him or his ranch. The smart thing would be to guard his heart, to keep some distance. But Lucas had never been particularly good at doing the smart thing when it came to matters of feeling. On the 8th night after the robbery, after everyone else had gone to sleep, Fiona found Lucas sitting on the porch in the darkness. She sat beside him without asking, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I have been thinking," she said, "about Virginia City and the teaching position." Lucas's heart clenched, and I am not sure it is what I want anymore." She turned to look at him, her face pale in the moonlight. "I have been happy here, Lucas, happier than I have been in a long time. This work feels meaningful in a way that teaching someone else's children might not. Does that make sense?" "Yes," Lucas said, because it made perfect sense to him even if he was afraid to hope she was saying what he thought she was saying. "I know it has only been a little over a week," Fiona continued. "I know that is not enough time to really know a person, but I feel like I know you better than people I have known for years. You are kind and steady and honest. You work hard and you do not complain. You treated me with respect from the first moment, even when I was covered in dust and probably looked half wild. You looked capable and brave," Lucas said quietly. "That was what I saw." Fiona smiled, and even in the darkness he could see it reach her eyes. "I do not want to go to Virginia City. I want to stay here if you will have me, not as a guest or hired help but as a partner in this ranch. I have a little money still, enough to buy a share if you would consider it, and I can work as hard as any man. We could build this place together." Lucas felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Fiona, I do not care about your money. If you want to stay, you can stay, but I need to be honest with you about something." "What?" she asked, a trace of worry entering her voice. "I am falling in love with you," Lucas said, the words coming out rough but true. "Have been since about the third day you were here, when you threatened to dump cold water on Patterson if he did not stop complaining about the coffee. I cannot offer you a partnership and pretend it is just business when what I really want is a whole lot more than that." Fiona was quiet for so long that Lucas started to worry he had ruined everything. Then she reached over and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I am falling in love with you too," she said softly. "I have been trying not to, because it seemed foolish to fall for someone when I was supposed to be leaving. But I cannot help it. You make me feel seen in a way I have not felt since my mother died. Like who I really am is enough, without pretending or trying to fit into someone else's idea of proper." Lucas turned to her, reaching up to cup her face with his free hand. "You are more than enough. You are everything I did not know I was looking for." He kissed her then, gentle and questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. But she did not pull away. She leaned into him and kissed him back with a fierceness that took his breath away. They stayed like that for a long time, learning the shape and taste of each other under the vast Nevada sky, until the cold finally drove them inside. They lay together on Lucas's pallet in the sitting room, properly clothed but tangled together. talking in whispers about their hopes and dreams and plans. Lucas told her about his vision for the ranch, about wanting to raise the best cattle in the Sierra Nevada, and maybe someday having enough money to hire help so they could occasionally travel. Fiona told him about her mother, who had died when Fiona was 16, and how she had been trying to find her way back to the kind of purposeful life her mother had lived ever since. "My mother used to say that the best life was one you built with your own hands alongside someone you loved," Fiona said, her head resting on Lucas's shoulder. "I think she would have liked you." "I think I would have liked her," Lucas replied, pressing a kiss to Fiona's hair. "She raised a remarkable daughter." They talked until exhaustion pulled them under, and Lucas woke a few hours later to pale dawn light and the realization that Fiona was still in his arms. She stirred when he moved, blinking up at him with sleepy contentment. "Morning," she murmured. "Morning," he replied and kissed her forehead. "I should get up and tend the animals, and I should start breakfast." But neither of them moved for several more minutes, reluctant to break the spell of the moment. When they finally emerged into the main room, they found Carlson sitting up in bed looking significantly improved and watching them with a knowing expression. "About time you two figured that out," the driver said with a rasping laugh. "Miss Fiona here has been looking at you like you hung the moon since about the second day, and you have not been much better." Fiona blushed, but did not deny it. "How are you feeling, Mr. Carlson? Like I might actually survive after all, thanks to you and Lucas here." Carlson's expression grew serious. "I owe you both my life, I mean that. If there is ever anything I can do for either of you, you just say the word." "There might be something," Lucas said slowly, an idea forming. "Do you still drive for the stage line? Have been for 15 years. Why? Would you be willing to tell your employer that Fiona missed the coach because she was helping nurse you? Ask them to refund her fare to Virginia City." Carlson nodded immediately. "Absolutely. Hell, I will tell them she saved my life, which is nothing but the truth. They owe her at minimum the cost of her ticket, probably more." "I do not need more," Fiona said quickly. "Just the fare money would help. Lucas and I are going to be partners in the ranch, and every dollar will count." Carlson's grin widened. "Partners, is it? Well, congratulations to you both. This is good land, and with two people working it smart, you will do well." The replacement stage arrived 9 days after the robbery, driven by a different man, but carrying a letter from the stage line that offered both profound apologies and a full refund of Fiona's fare, along with an extra $20 in compensation for her help in saving their driver's life. Patterson and Mrs. Dunphy packed quickly, clearly eager to be gone. Carlson moved more slowly but with determination, insisting he was well enough for the journey to Sacramento. "You are sure you do not want to come along?" Carlson asked Fiona as he prepared to board. "I know you had plans in Virginia City." "I have better plans here," Fiona said and reached for Lucas's hand. He took it gladly, lacing their fingers together in full view of everyone. Carlson nodded his approval. "You take care of her, Lucas, and Fiona, you keep him honest." "I will," they said in unison, then laughed. They watched the stage roll away down the mountain road, and when it disappeared from view, Lucas turned to Fiona. "So," he said, "partners." "Partners," she agreed. "Though I think we should make it official sooner rather than later, do not you?" "Are you proposing to me, Fiona Sinclair?" "I am suggesting that we should probably get married before winter sets in," Fiona said with a smile that was both shy and bold. "Small-town morality being what it is. Besides, I would like to be Fiona Vance before we have to explain our partnership to too many people." Lucas felt his heart swell so large it seemed impossible his chest could contain it. "Then I am formally asking you to marry me. Will you?" "Yes," Fiona said simply. "I will." They were married 3 weeks later in Truckee's small church, with Dr. Morrison and his wife standing as witnesses. It was a simple ceremony, with Fiona wearing a dress she had sewn herself from fabric Lucas had bought in town, and Lucas in his best shirt and pants. But simple did not mean it was not profound. When Lucas promised to love and cherish Fiona for the rest of his life, he meant every word with a depth that surprised him. And when Fiona promised the same, he saw his own feelings reflected in her eyes. The first year of their marriage was hard work, but joyful. They expanded the herd gradually, buying young stock when prices were good and selling at market when the time was right. Fiona proved to have a head for numbers and took over managing their finances, which freed Lucas to focus on the physical work of the ranch. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, how to work together and when to give each other space, and through it all, their love deepened and grew more solid. Winter was brutal that first year, with snow piling 6 feet high around the house and temperatures that turned water to ice in minutes. But they had prepared well, stockpiling food and firewood, and the long dark months gave them time to simply be together. They read aloud to each other from the books Fiona had managed to save from the robbery, talked for hours about everything and nothing, and made love under piles of quilts while wind howled outside. Spring came eventually, as it always did, turning the mountain meadows green and dotted with wildflowers. Fiona announced she was pregnant in May, and Lucas felt fear and joy war in his chest. Childbirth was dangerous, especially this far from proper medical care, but Fiona seemed unworried. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she reminded him when she caught him hovering anxiously. "I am strong and healthy, and Dr. Morrison has delivered hundreds of babies. I will be fine." She was right, though Lucas aged a decade during the long night of labor. Their son was born in January of 1875. A healthy baby with his mother's gray-green eyes and his father's dark hair. They named him Samuel, after Lucas's grandfather, and from the moment Lucas held his son for the first time, he understood in a new way what it meant to build something that would last beyond himself. Fiona took to motherhood with the same competence she brought to everything else, but she was not content to spend all her time indoors with the baby. By the time Samuel was 3 months old, she had fashioned a sling that let her carry him while doing lighter ranch work, and by 6 months she was back to full participation in running the ranch. Lucas marveled at her strength and determination, and loved her more with each passing day. They added more land over the next few years, buying adjacent parcels as they became available. The ranch grew from 30 acres to 80, then to 120. They hired their first ranch hand when Samuel was 2, a young man named Thomas who had just arrived from Wyoming looking for work. 2 years after Samuel came a daughter, Elizabeth, who had her mother's auburn hair and her father's serious disposition. And 2 years after Elizabeth came another son, Henry, who was sunny-tempered and fearless from birth. Through all of it, Lucas and Fiona remained partners in the truest sense. They made decisions together, supported each other through hard times, and celebrated successes as shared victories. They had disagreements, of course, sometimes heated ones, but they had learned early how to fight fair and never went to bed angry. Carlson visited occasionally, having partially retired from driving to take a desk job with the stage line in Sacramento. He always marveled at how much the ranch had grown and how happy Lucas and Fiona clearly were. On one visit, when Samuel was 5 and following his father everywhere like a devoted shadow, Carlson pulled Lucas aside. "You know, I never properly thanked you," Carlson said, "for saving my life that day." "You thanked me plenty," Lucas replied, And you helped Fiona get her money back from the stage line. We are more than even. Maybe in practical terms, Carlson allowed, but I want you to know that I think about that day often. About how you did not hesitate to help, even though we were strangers and you had no reason to put yourself at risk. That kind of goodness is rare, Lucas. This world needs more of it. Lucas felt uncomfortable with the praise but recognized the sincerity behind it. I just did what anyone should do. But most people do not, Carlson said. Most people look after themselves first and help others maybe if it is convenient. You put yourself in front of a runaway stagecoach. You gave up your home and your bed. You treated Fiona with respect and kindness when she had nothing. That matters more than you probably realize. After Carlson left, Lucas found Fiona in the kitchen preparing dinner while Elizabeth played with wooden blocks on the floor. He wrapped his arms around his wife from behind and rested his chin on her shoulder. What was that for? Fiona asked, but she was smiling. Just remembering how lucky I am, Lucas said. That your stagecoach broke down in front of my ranch, that you decided to stay, that you chose this life with me. Fiona turned in his arms to face him. I am the lucky one. You gave me a home when I had nothing. You treated me like an equal when most men would have expected me to be grateful for their charity. You loved me before you even knew if I could love you back. Your presence was payment enough, Lucas said, echoing his words from that first day. It still is, every single day. They kissed, and Elizabeth made an exaggerated sound of disgust that made them both laugh. These were the moments Lucas treasured most, the ordinary ones that made up a life. Not the dramatic rescues or the grand gestures, but the daily choice to build something together, to love each other through mundane struggles and small joys alike. Years continued to pass. The children grew, Samuel becoming a serious boy who loved working with the cattle, Elizabeth developing a fierce intelligence and curiosity about everything, and Henry remaining the sunny heart of their family. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful in the area. Lucas and Fiona hired more help as needed but remained hands-on in running things, neither willing to become the kind of owner who did not know their own land and animals. When Samuel turned 10, Lucas taught him to ride the fence line and check the cattle properly. When Elizabeth was 8, Fiona started teaching her to read at an advanced level and encouraged her daughter's questions about everything from botany to business. And Henry, at 6, was already showing signs of having his mother's way with animals, able to calm a spooked horse with just his voice. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas took Fiona back to the spot where they had first kissed. On the porch of the original small house, they had since expanded into a proper ranch house. They sat in the same positions they had occupied that night, shoulders touching, looking out at land they had built together. You ever regret it? Lucas asked. Staying here instead of becoming a teacher in Virginia City. Sometimes I wonder if you gave up too much for this life. Fiona was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously as she always did. I think about Virginia City sometimes, she admitted. I wonder what that life would have been like, but I do not regret choosing this instead. How could I regret the life that gave me you and our children and this place we have built? I just want you to be happy, Lucas said. As happy as you have made me. I am happy, Fiona assured him, taking his hand. Not every moment of every day because that is not realistic. But deep down in the ways that matter, I am happier than I ever imagined being. You gave me a partnership, Lucas. A real one where my voice matters and my work has value. You have never tried to make me smaller or quieter or more conventional. That is rarer and more precious than I think you know. Lucas pulled her close and kissed her temple. You made it easy. You are the strongest person I know, Fiona. You face everything straight on, whether it is a difficult birth or a harsh winter or a child with a fever. You never give up and you never complain. I am in awe of you, honestly." "We make a good team," Fiona said softly. "That is what matters. Not who is stronger or braver or better, but that we work well together, that we build each other up instead of tearing each other down." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Somewhere inside, their children were laughing over something, the sound drifting through the open windows. The cattle were settled for the night, the horses were fed and watered, and everything was as it should be. Lucas thought about that day 10 years ago when a runaway stagecoach had careened onto his property. How he had expected to spend his life alone, focused on building his ranch with no one to share it with. How Fiona had arrived covered in dust and immediately begun helping without being asked. How her offer to pay with labor had given him the opportunity to say words he had not even known were in his heart. "Your presence is payment enough for me." It had been true then, and it was true now, and Lucas knew it would be true for the rest of his life. Fiona's presence was not just payment but gift, not just company but completion. She had transformed his house into a home, his land into a legacy, his solitary existence into a life rich with love and meaning. More years passed, bringing both joy and sorrow as all years do. They lost Henry to influenza when he was 12, a grief so profound it nearly broke them both. But they held each other through it, and eventually the sharp edges of pain dulled into an ache they learned to carry. They honored Henry's memory by living fully, by loving fiercely, by making the most of each day they were given. Samuel grew into a fine man who shared his father's love of ranching and his mother's sharp mind for business. He married a girl from town named Mary, and they built a house on the far end of the ranch property, choosing to stay and help expand the family enterprise rather than seeking fortune elsewhere. Elizabeth surprised everyone by studying law, one of the first women in California to do so, and opened a practice in Sacramento that focused on helping people who could not afford expensive attorneys. She visited often, bringing stories of her cases and fierce arguments about justice that reminded Lucas so much of her mother. Lucas and Fiona grew old together, their hair going gray and their hands becoming gnarled with arthritis, but their love never diminished. They still worked the ranch together as much as their aging bodies allowed, though they increasingly relied on Samuel and his growing family to handle the hardest physical labor. They became grandparents multiple times over, and there was nothing Lucas loved more than watching Fiona with their grandchildren, seeing how she poured into them the same wisdom and strength she had given their own children. On a warm summer evening in 1899, when they had been married for 24 years, Lucas and Fiona sat once again on their porch watching the sunset. Lucas's joints ached and his back was not what it used to be, but Fiona's hand in his was as perfect as it had been the first time they touched. "I have been thinking," Fiona said, her voice a bit raspier than it had been in her youth but still strong, "about that day the stagecoach broke down. How terrified I was, even though I tried not to show it. We had just been robbed, Tommy was dead, Mr. Carlson was dying, and I had no idea what was going to happen to us." "You never seemed terrified," Lucas said. "You seemed like the bravest person I had ever met." "I was good at pretending," Fiona admitted. "But then you stopped those horses, and you helped Mr. Carlson without even asking who would pay you, and I remember thinking that maybe everything would be all right after all. And I was right. Everything has been more than all right." "Better than I ever dreamed," Lucas agreed. "Some people spend their whole lives looking for what we found by accident." "Not accident," Fiona corrected gently. "Maybe not planning or intention, but not accident either. We found each other because we were both the kind of people who help without being asked, who work without complaining, who value partnership over possession. That was not accident. That was recognition. Lucas considered this and realized she was right. If he had been a different kind of man, one who demanded payment before helping, or who saw Fiona's vulnerability as something to exploit, none of this would have happened. And if Fiona had been a different kind of woman, one who expected to be taken care of rather than contributing, or who looked down on physical labor, she would have gone to Virginia City, and he would have remained alone. "I love you," Lucas said, as he had said countless times over the years. But the words never got old because they were always true as the mountains that surrounded their ranch, as constant as the seasons that marked their years. "I love you too," Fiona replied, as she always did, and squeezed his hand. They sat together as the stars came out, these two people who had built a life from near tragedy, who had transformed a moment of crisis into decades of partnership and love. The ranch would continue after they were gone, passed down to Samuel and his children and their children after that. But more important than the land or the cattle or the buildings was the legacy of how they had loved each other, how they had treated each other as true equals, how they had faced every challenge together as partners in every sense of the word. Lucas thought about young men and women who might one day stand where he stood, looking out at land that he and Fiona had nurtured and improved. He hoped they would know the story, would understand that this place was built on more than hard work and good fortune. It was built on the simple choice to help someone in need, to recognize worth in another person, to value presence over payment. As they finally rose to go inside, moving slowly but together, Lucas sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for runaway stagecoaches and mountain roads, and the strange ways fate brought people together. He was grateful for every day he had been given with Fiona, every challenge they had overcome, every joy they had shared. Inside, Samuel and Mary were settling their children down for the night, the house full of voices and laughter. This was what Lucas and Fiona had built, not just a successful ranch but a family rooted in love and respect, in hard work and mutual support. They went to bed that night as they had for 24 years, side by side, Fiona's head on Lucas's shoulder and his arm around her waist. In the morning there would be work to do, grandchildren to spoil, a ranch to run. But tonight there was just this, the simple, profound comfort of lying beside the person you loved most in the world. "Lucas," Fiona murmured in the darkness. "Yes, thank you for stopping that stagecoach. For helping us, for telling me my presence was payment enough." Lucas tightened his arm around her. "Thank you for staying, for choosing this life, for being my partner in everything." "Always," Fiona promised, and they fell asleep together as they had so many times before, grateful for what they had found in each other and for all the years they had been blessed to share. The ranch continued to thrive as the new century approached. Samuel proved to be an excellent manager, implementing modern techniques while respecting the foundation his parents had built. His children grew up running through the same fields Lucas had cultivated, learning the same lessons about hard work and integrity that he had taught Samuel. Elizabeth's law practice flourished, and she became known throughout California as a fierce advocate for justice. She never married, claiming she was married to her work, but she maintained a close relationship with her parents and visited the ranch frequently. On those visits, she and Fiona would sit for hours discussing cases and philosophy and the changing role of women in society. Lucas loved listening to them, proud beyond measure of both women. When Lucas was 60, a journalist from San Francisco came to interview him about the growth of ranching in the Sierra Nevada. During the interview, the journalist asked what Lucas attributed his success to. "Partnership," Lucas answered without hesitation. My wife Fiona and I built this place together, as true equals. I could not have done it without her, and I would not have wanted to try. The journalist, a young man who clearly expected a more conventional answer about hard work and shrewd business dealings, pressed for more details. Lucas told him the story of how they met, about the runaway stagecoach and Fiona's offer to pay with labor. And you told her that her presence was payment enough, the journalist asked, scribbling notes. That is quite romantic. It was true, Lucas said simply. I did not say it to be romantic. I said it because having her there, having someone competent and brave and willing to work alongside me, that was more valuable than any amount of money she could have paid. And I have never regretted that decision, not for a single day in 27 years. The article, when it was published, focused heavily on this story, and Lucas was embarrassed by the attention it brought. But Fiona just laughed and said it was good for people to know that successful partnerships between men and women were possible and valuable. More years passed, as they always do. Lucas and Fiona watched their grandchildren grow and begin to have children of their own. They saw the 20th century arrive, bringing with it automobiles and telephones and countless other changes that would have seemed like magic in their youth. Through it all, the ranch remained a constant, a testament to what two people could build when they worked together with respect and love. Lucas was 73 when he had a heart attack while checking on the cattle. He survived, but Dr. Morrison, now ancient himself and barely still practicing, warned that Lucas needed to slow down significantly. Fiona, who was 71 and still sharp as ever, took the warning seriously and insisted Lucas retire from active work on the ranch. Samuel and his boys can handle it now, she said firmly when Lucas protested. You have worked hard enough for one lifetime. Let us enjoy what time we have left without you killing yourself from stubbornness. Lucas grumbled but agreed, and found to his surprise that retirement suited him better than he expected. He and Fiona spent their days reading, talking, and enjoying their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They took short walks around the property when the weather was good, Lucas leaning on a cane and Fiona moving more slowly than she once had, but still steady. On a bright autumn afternoon in 1904, 30 years after the runaway stagecoach had brought Fiona into his life, Lucas and Fiona sat on their porch for what would prove to be the last time together. The leaves were turning gold and red on the aspens that grew along the creek, and the air had the crisp bite that promised winter was coming. I have had a good life, Lucas said, not because he felt death approaching, but because it was simply true and worth saying. Better than I ever expected or deserved. You deserved every bit of it, Fiona said firmly. You are a good man, Lucas Vance. You have been a good husband and father and grandfather. You have worked honestly and treated people fairly. If that does not deserve a good life, I do not know what does. I would not have had any of it without you, Lucas said, taking her hand. You made everything better, everything brighter. You gave me a reason to build something that would last beyond myself. Fiona leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sun began to set. Around them was everything they had built together: the expanded house, the well-maintained barns, the healthy cattle grazing in the fields. But more than the physical structures was the family they had created, the love they had nurtured, the example they had set for their children and grandchildren about what a true partnership looked like. Lucas died peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks later, with Fiona beside him. She held his hand as his breathing slowed and finally stopped, and though her heart was breaking, she was grateful that he had not suffered, that his last weeks had been peaceful and surrounded by family. Fiona lived another 4 years, remaining sharp-minded and involved in the ranch's affairs until the very end. She died at 75 in the same bed where Lucas had died, and those who saw her body said she looked peaceful, almost happy. Samuel, settling her affairs, found a letter she had written to be opened after her death. In it, she wrote about the day the stagecoach had broken down, about how scared she had been but how Lucas's calm competence had steadied her. She wrote about their 34 years of marriage, about the joys and sorrows they had shared, about how grateful she was for every single day. And she ended with this: "I offered to pay with labor, and he said my presence was payment enough." Those words changed my life. They told me I was valued for who I was, not what I could provide or how I could be useful. Lucas saw me as a full person, as an equal partner, and he never wavered from that in all our years together. That gift, that simple gift of being truly seen and valued, is what allowed me to flourish and become the person I was meant to be. I hope that everyone is lucky enough to find someone who values their presence the way Lucas valued mine. It makes all the difference. Samuel read the letter aloud at Fiona's funeral, and there was not a dry eye in the church. The story of Lucas and Fiona Vance became part of local legend, told and retold as an example of true partnership and enduring love. The ranch continued to thrive under Samuel's management, and later under his children, each generation building on what Lucas and Fiona had started. Years later, when Samuel was an old man himself, he would sit with his own grandchildren and tell them about their great-grandparents, about how Lucas had stopped a runaway stagecoach with his bare hands, about how Fiona had stayed calm during a crisis and helped nurse a wounded man back to health, about how they had built the ranch together as true partners, making decisions together and respecting each other's strengths. "The most important thing they taught me," Samuel would say, "is that the best relationships are built on mutual respect and shared work. Your great-grandmother was as much a part of building this ranch as your great-grandfather was. He never would have succeeded without her, and he knew it and made sure everyone else knew it too. That is what made their love story special. Not grand gestures or dramatic rescues, though there was some of that too, but the daily choice to treat each other as equals, to build something together, to value each other's presence above all else." The ranch that Lucas and Fiona built together remained in the Vance family for generations, a testament to what two people could accomplish when they truly worked as partners. And though the specific details of their daily lives faded with time, the core of their story endured because it was a story about something fundamental and universal, about recognizing worth in another person, about choosing love over convenience, about building a life together one day at a time. In the end, Lucas had been right that first day. Fiona's presence had been payment enough, more than enough. It had been the foundation for everything good in his life, and her presence continued to echo through the generations that followed, a reminder that the greatest riches in life could not be measured in money or land, but in the love shared between two people who truly saw and valued each other.